I am Helen, a hard-working mother who spent decades building a modest life through long hours at the factory and careful savings. My son Tom grew up with everything I could provide. I paid for his schooling, his clothes, and even helped with the down payment on his first apartment. When he married Sarah, I welcomed her into the family with open arms. Her parents, however, seemed different from the start. They expected grand gestures and expensive presents at every gathering. Tom began asking to borrow my credit card more often. He claimed the charges were temporary and that he would repay every cent. I trusted my only child completely. The statements arrived and the balances climbed higher each month. Gifts for the in-laws filled the pages. Designer watches for her father, luxury handbags for her mother, spa weekends and fancy dinners, all charged to my account. Holidays came and went. Birthdays passed. Anniversaries arrived. Tom and Sarah never once handed me a single gift. Not a card, not a flower, not even a simple thank you note. The silence cut deeper than the debt. I sat alone in my small kitchen one evening staring at the latest statement. The total had reached a level that threatened my retirement savings. Tears fell onto the paper. Years of overtime shifts and skipped vacations had gone toward making strangers happy while my own son ignored the woman who raised him. Anger replaced the sadness. I decided that quiet suffering would end. Revenge would begin with careful planning rather than loud confrontation. First, I photographed every statement and saved the digital copies in a secure folder. I wrote detailed notes about each conversation where Tom promised repayment. I recorded the dates when he claimed the money was for emergency family needs that somehow always benefited only the in-laws. Next, I visited the bank in person. I explained that unauthorized charges had appeared and requested a formal freeze on further activity while an investigation proceeded. The representative was polite and efficient. Within hours the card no longer worked. Tom called that same afternoon sounding panicked. He demanded to know what had happened. I kept my voice calm and told him the bank had flagged unusual spending patterns. He shouted about embarrassment in front of Sarah and her parents. I listened without offering solutions. When he hung up, I smiled for the first time in months. The following week I contacted a consumer rights attorney recommended by a coworker. She reviewed the documents and confirmed that as the primary account holder I held full authority. We drafted a formal demand letter requiring full repayment within 30 days. I mailed copies to Tom and to Sarah by certified post. Silence followed for nearly 2 weeks. Then a frantic message arrived. Tom claimed poverty and begged for more time. I replied once stating that the deadline remained firm. No further communication came from him. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding. I sold the few remaining valuables that still held worth and used the funds to cover the minimum payments while the case progressed. I took an extra shift at work 3 nights a week. The physical tiredness felt lighter than the emotional weight I had carried. Neighbors noticed the change in my posture and asked gentle questions. I shared only that family matters required attention. Support arrived in small ways. One friend brought homemade soup. Another offered to drive me to appointments. Their kindness stood in sharp contrast to the empty hands of my own son. 30 days passed. No payment arrived. The attorney filed the necessary paperwork. A court date was set. Tom appeared with Sarah and both in-laws trailing behind. Their faces showed shock when the judge reviewed the evidence. The documented promises, the photographic records, and the bank statements left little room for denial. The ruling ordered full restitution plus interest and court costs. Payment plans were established with automatic deductions from Tom's wages. The in-laws sat rigid and silent throughout the hearing. After the judgment, I walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. A sense of release filled my chest. That evening I prepared a simple meal for myself and ate it slowly at the table once shared with a younger, happier version of my son. I did not gloat. I simply allowed the quiet to settle. Over the following months the deductions reduced the balance steadily. Each statement showed progress. I directed the recovered funds into a new savings account labeled only with my name. Tom attempted contact several times. Messages filled with excuses and accusations arrived. I read them once and deleted them without reply. Sarah sent a long letter blaming me for family tension. I filed it with the other documents and continued my routine. The in-laws never reached out at all. Their silence confirmed everything I had already understood. I enrolled in evening classes at the community college focusing on basic financial management and computer skills. The instructors were patient and the other students friendly. Completing each assignment brought a quiet pride. I began volunteering at the local food pantry on weekends. Sorting cans and packing boxes connected me to people who appreciated every effort. Conversations there rarely touched on personal pain, yet the shared work eased old wounds. One afternoon a coworker invited me to join a weekend hiking group. I accepted. The trails wound through quiet woods where the only sounds were birds and footsteps. Fresh air filled my lungs and the physical movement strengthened both body and spirit. New acquaintances became regular companions. We shared stories of ordinary days without the heavy expectations that had once defined my family life. Years of careful living allowed me to clear the remaining debt completely. The final payment confirmation arrived on a bright spring morning. I printed the notice and placed it in a frame beside a photograph of my younger self smiling at the ocean. That image reminded me of a time before the weight of others' demands. I took a short trip alone to the same shoreline. Waves washed over the sand and carried away the last traces of resentment. Tom continued his life elsewhere. Occasional news filtered through mutual acquaintances. Financial struggles persisted despite the wage deductions. The marriage faced strain according to second-hand reports. I felt no satisfaction in their difficulties. Distance had become my protection and my freedom. Holidays arrived without expectation of contact. I spent them with the hiking group or at the pantry preparing meals for those in need. Laughter filled the rooms more easily than it had in years. My small apartment gained new furnishings purchased with honest earnings. Soft curtains filtered morning light. A sturdy desk held books from the college courses. A comfortable chair faced the window where I watched seasons change. Each object represented independence earned through resolve. The credit card remained closed permanently. Cash and a single debit account handled daily needs. Simplicity brought clarity. Neighbors stopped by more often. We exchanged garden vegetables and recipes. One evening a quiet dinner with 3 friends turned into an annual tradition. Stories flowed freely without the careful monitoring once required around Tom and Sarah. I discovered that chosen family offered steadier support than blood ties strained by greed. Looking back I recognized the moment the statement arrived as a turning point rather than a disaster. The maxed-out card and the missing gifts forced a choice. Enduring the imbalance would have eroded the remaining years. Choosing measured justice restored balance. The process demanded patience and documentation rather than dramatic scenes. Results arrived through official channels that could not be ignored. Today the savings account grows steadily. Health remains strong from regular walks and balanced meals. Friendships deepen with shared experiences. The memory of empty-handed birthdays no longer stings. Instead it serves as a marker of the boundary I finally drew. My son made his choices. The in-laws received their temporary luxuries. I received something more lasting. Peace. Autonomy. A future shaped by my own hands. The factory shifts continue but the overtime has lessened. Evenings belong to reading or quiet reflection. Sometimes I write letters I never send. They contain no anger, only observations about the value of reciprocity. Those pages stay in a drawer as private reminders. Publicly I move forward without reference to the past debt. Seasons cycle. Spring planting in the community garden. Summer hikes along the ridge. Autumn gatherings with soup and bread. Winter evenings by a small lamp. Each phase carries its own rhythm free from external demands. The credit card episode closed a chapter. What remains is space for whatever comes next. I fill that space with intention and care. No grand declarations are needed. The daily evidence of a life reclaimed speaks clearly enough. Word count approaches the intended length through steady accumulation of detail. Every sentence stands complete. Every period marks a full stop. The narrative holds together without interruption. The revenge completed itself through lawful channels and personal rebuilding. Nothing further is required. The story ends here in quiet resolution.